Good night, everybody. We got a lot to talk about. Not a lot of time for me to talk about it. So I'm going to try to do about 5 or 6 topics. Hopefully, I'll be able to do it at a good pace, even though I'm kind of not trying to stay on for over an hour like I do sometimes. So I know I haven't been on this week as much because I'm trying to edit this long video, which I'm hoping when it comes out, if I can get it out, because I don't know if the software is going to output it well. You'll have a video that I think I can be proud of. It's going to be pretty awesome. Not going to reveal the theme yet, but it's going to go along the lines of a certain network that I've critiqued before. Anyway, so it's been a busy day. Of course, the Jerusalem stuff I'm going to cover probably towards the end. But because there's so much to discuss, I'm going to try to do some of the other topics first so that I don't forget them. I got some tea here. I've been taking some of these anti-cough pills, so we'll see if they've been working, because it hasn't been as bad as as it was in the past, but it's still not great. Anyway, let's start with everybody's favorite resident liberal idiot, Lizzie Warren, who has had a rough couple weeks, starting with that epic Trump insult of hers at the Navajo Code Talker ceremony. that is a day that will live in infamy for liberal Democrats, because they're really the problem is that it's not that Donald Trump is a brilliant person in that respect. I mean, yeah, the trolling is brilliant, but their foundation, the foundation of a lot of these people's stories and their personal histories is so weak that it doesn't stand even the most basic scrutiny. So if you think about it, Elizabeth Warren has had all of about, I think she's been in the Senate for 7 or 8 years. She's had plenty of time to come out and really explore her quote unquote heritage as a Native American. And on November 30th, somebody went out and actually called her out on it. That's not somebody from the conservative side, not somebody who might be, with an axe to grind normally. So a lot of people think that Elizabeth Warren is a loudmouth and she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, which are both accurate characterizations of her. It says here, and this is in Think Progress, which is one of the most partisan pro-democratic blogs in the country. It says, op-ed, I am a Cherokee woman. Elizabeth Warren is not. As Native people, we are relegated to being invisible, while Warren is not. That's kind of a funny way of putting it. It says, for 72 hours this week, news headlines focused on President Donald Trump's offensive usage of the name Pocahontas when he referred to Senator Elizabeth Warren at an event to honor Navajo Code Talkers on Monday. As a young Cherokee woman, one would assume that I would take Warren's side in standing up against Trump's racist remark. Following the incident, Warren lambasted the president, telling MSNBC that Trump has done this over and over, thinking somehow he's going to shut me up with it. It hadn't worked in the past. It is not going to work in the future. A real Native American hero, right? Wrong. She was not a hero to me when she failed to foster a haven of support for Native students within Harvard University's alienating Ivy League culture. She is not a hero for spending years awkwardly avoiding Native leaders. She is not a hero because, despite claiming to be the only Native woman in the U.S. Senate, she has done nothing to advance our rights. She is not from us. She does not represent us. She is not Cherokee. The controversy over Warren's identity stems from the 1990s, when Warren was a professor at Harvard Law School. The university promoted her and celebrated her as the first minority woman to receive tenure. When the Boston press dug up these reports during Warren's campaign for Senate in 2012, she stated she didn't know why Harvard had promoted her as Native American. It appears that Warren categorized herself as a minority when it served her career and later dropped the marker after gaining tenure. In defending her supposed Native identity, Warren has drawn from both racist stereotypes and easily refutable stories about her family. At a 2012 press conference, Warren stated that her family knew her grandfather was, quote, part Cherokee because he had high cheekbones like all of the Indians. Cherokee genealogists have pored through her family history to find that none of her direct line ancestors has ever shown to be anything other than white, dating back to long before the Trail of Tears. To add insult to injury, despite Warren's public claims of Native American heritage, she has decidedly avoided talking with Native leaders and in 2012 refused to meet with a group of Cherokee women at the Democratic National Convention. As Cherokee Nation citizen and community activist David Cornsall told me, we don't get to celebrate her because we don't know her. She is not related to us. She does not live in our community. She is not our conduit to the Senate. We are not celebrating her in the tribal newspaper. Elizabeth Warren is nothing to us. So we have no inroad to that powerful operation that affects our lives. Warren's misrepresent. So anyway, it goes on, and it's, you know, it's a good. I mean, it might be the best, the best example of journalism in Think Progress, which is a shitty blog, by the way. And it says this is a says correction. An earlier version of this piece stated that Warren checked a Native American box on job applications. In fact, Warren listed herself as a minority in an Association of American Law Schools directory. So the woman who wrote this is not really a woman, apparently. It says Rebecca Nagel is a citizen of Cherokee Nation and a two-spirit queer woman. She is currently a writer and organizer living in Baltimore, Maryland. So, and this is what she looks like. Yeah, that's really ambiguous gender here, right? I can't stand this whole bullshit about, you know, new gender identities and things. Like the two-spirit one is one of the funnier ones. It's like those people. It's the same as a lot of those white people that in the 90s they were really into reggae, but they couldn't quite get the accent, so they called themselves a ska band or something. That's what these new gender identities like two-spirit are. If you're too ugly to or not convincing enough to pass yourself off as the new identity that you want, you make up some new term. And two-spirit was apparently there was something like that in Native American cultures, but what they're doing with it is basically like some sort of you know, it's some sort of summer camp shit. Anyway, but with Elizabeth Warren, this is pretty funny. This is somebody who she's not going to be able to shake this off before next year's election, and so it's going to be a little harder for her to win next year. Even though, remember, it's Massachusetts, it's very hard for anybody who's not a liberal Democrat to win in Massachusetts for the Senate. But we'll have to see how that works. I'm not very optimistic about her losing her Senate seat, whether it's to a Republican or to the independent candidate. I think his name is Shiva something. He's Indian. I don't know what his last name is. Can't pronounce his last name. But his whole slogan is, only a real Indian can beat a fake Indian. That's what's so funny about it. Let's see if there's any comments in the chat. Let me mute this window first so I don't get blindsided. Lisa says, Pocahontas, the Cherokee don't acknowledge her as a member of their tribe, although she claims to be Cherokee. In fact, Lizzie's great-grandfather killed a native. I heard about that, the Trail of Tears thing. Thanks, Lisa, for tuning in today. And there's much more stuff to talk about. Next one I think I'm going to do, you've heard of that whole issue with California. I've been watching, I haven't been following it so close, but there's these wildfires right now, and California is basically going up in flames, especially Southern California. I saw the Fresno area. I know a couple. I actually have a very good friend in the San Diego area, which I don't know if that's really in the front line of the wildfires, but If it is, I better reach out to him. But then again, he works in the defense industry, so I'm sure that they're gonna try to find a way to help that guy. But yeah, California is burning, and it's a very tragic irony, given that a lot of people during the hurricane season, they were making fun of Houston, and they were making fun of, oh, red states are getting their punishment from God for supporting Donald Trump. Well, how do you explain this? I mean, it's not as seasonal. I think that in the or actually early December, you see wildfires in California. That's a freak occurrence, and I don't think that it's really. I mean, obviously there has to be some sort of climate implication, just like they always do. They blame everything on global warming. You know, it's their easy scapegoat. But in the midst of this all, just like with all the other disasters in California, there was that dam that broke. There were wildfires, I think a month and a half ago in Northern California. In the midst, in the midst of all that, California is basically falling apart in terms of its budget. It's really overrun its debts. There's also a concern coming up that a number of its most lucrative businesses may not be the tax cows that they once were. That would be Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley, listen, there's always going to be great profitability to Silicon Valley, but nowadays you can develop a lot of technology throughout the world. It's not as if you have to be in Palo Alto or one of the other Silicon Valley communities to really succeed in tech. I mean, there's campuses all over the world: India, Russia, Israel, China, South Korea. They're really competing now. Of course, we're talking about the United States, but there are a number of states, Texas for one, that are trying to break into high tech, trying to break into basically the Silicon Valley industries. It's not the same as it was back in the 60s and 70s and you know, going up until today, when Silicon Valley probably became the superpower it was, let's say in the 80s. Okay, that's when really circuit boards and semiconductors started to become really something that was going to be a driver in the economy, right? Because until probably the early 80s, owning a personal computer was kind of pointless. People didn't really need it. It didn't perform that many functions. But since then, you know, it's become more of a consumer product. So, as with every industry, you know, there used to be entire cities that were dependent on the textile industry. Once it became easier to have some of these machines that would weave textiles or automate them or whatever, a lot of those communities went belly up. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Silicon Valley, but California is largely dependent on that part of the economy. They're heavy industry, and their manufacturing is on the wane. California's environmental regulations are strangling it to death, and so is its tax structure. People can't live in peace in California because they're afraid of wildfires. They're afraid of anti-discrimination laws that make you bake cakes for people that, you know, people that wear fanny packs. And basically it's become a state that it's beholden to the certain class of people that they lived very well for the past few decades, and they think the rest of the country should live exactly like them. Well, it's taken its toll. It says, I have this from the San Jose Mercury News. It says, I think it's from their columnist Dan Walters. It says, could California be seeing the onset of a recession? Twice each year, once in January and again in May, Governor Jerry Brown, the liberal governor of California and the son of the liberal governor of California, warns Californians that the economic prosperity their state has enjoyed in recent years won't last forever. Brown attaches his admonishments to the budgets he proposed to the legislature, the initial one in January and a revised version 4 months later. Brown's latest, issued last May, cited uncertainty about turmoil in the national government, urged legislators to plan for and save for tougher budget times ahead, and added, by the time the budget is enacted in June, the economy will have finished its 8th year of expansion, only 2 years shorter than the longest recovery since World War II. A recession at some point is inevitable. So he's basically predicting his state's going to go bust. It's certain that Brown will renew his warning next month. Implicitly, he may hope that the inevitable recession he envisions will occur once his final term as governor ends in January 2019, because it would, his own financial advisors believe, have a devastating effect on the state budget. A new report from the Federal Bureau of Economic Analysis, however, hints that the downturn may have already started. The BEA releases state-by-state economic data each quarter, and its reports for the first and second quarters of 2017 are not good news for California. Last year was a very good one for the state's economy. The 3.3% gain in economic output in 2016 was more than double that of the nation as a whole and one of the highest of any state. However, California stumbled during the first half of 2017. California's increase was an anemic 0.6% in the first quarter compared to the same period of 2016, and 2.1% in the second quarter, well below the national rate and ranking 35th in the nation. So their growth is slowing down. The report revealed that almost every one of California's major sectors fell behind national trends in the second quarter, with the most conspicuous laggard being manufacturing. The only big California sector showing robust health was information, reflecting the unfortunate truism that Silicon Valley-centered technology industry continues to prop up an otherwise lackluster overall economy. It may only be a hiccup in California's $2.6 trillion economy, the 5th or largest in the world were it a nation, but maybe not. And skipping ahead, it says, however, the impact will not be confined to the budget. We could see unemployment, which has been at record low levels recently, skyrocket as it did a decade ago, with collateral impacts on housing, retail sales, and virtually every other economic activity. We would also see a new debate over whether California's high taxes, high labor and housing costs, and high levels of regulation have, as critics allege, made the state less attractive to job-creating investment and more vulnerable to a recession. Will it happen? Yes. A recession is inevitable, as Brown warns. What we don't know is when and whether it would seriously impact the high-tech industry. It is so vital to California's overall economic health that were it to falter, an otherwise mild recession could be devastating. So basically, we're seeing kind of a twilight in this, in the Golden State. The Golden State has been tarnished by this class of people. First of all, I mean, there's the Hollywood crowd with all their disgusting shit that's been coming out in the news. That's ruining it could be ruining the business reputation of California to some degree. I mean, let's not joke around. I think people are always going to be doing some business in LA, but this obsession right now with California being the vanguard of this resistance against Donald Trump is going to bite the liberals in the ass, because just like with the disasters earlier this year with the wildfires over there, they are now going to have to ask for federal aid in order to recover from these wildfires. It's going to be another embarrassment for Brown as he goes hat in hand. There was another story, not in the description. It's about Eric Garcetti, who's the mayor of LA. So there's this homeless activist And I'll show you the video. You won't be able to hear any audio, but I can show you the video here. And Eric Garcetti, the mayor of LA, he goes to this homeless activist and says to him, you know, he gives him an award, and fucking Ben Shapiro, and look what he ends up doing. He takes the award. You see what he's doing? He rejects the award. And how long is this? Yep. You see that? He's ripping the award up. Let me full screen this for you. See that? He's ripping the award up. So I hope you all saw that. If you didn't see the video, let me know, because I'll just put the link in the chat. But what's the point of this? That these politicians, these progressive politicians, they'll always do these photo ops where they try to say that they're helping the homeless, they're helping the poor. In reality, homelessness in California, and especially in LA, is worse than it's ever been. It's just growing and growing. And in fact, Shirley Hussar, whose show I can sometimes grab a few minutes of it. It's not always accessible. She says that downtown LA is like some sort of homeless tent city. So yeah, there's this major crisis coming to California, and the more of those people build up, and the more disorder there's going to be, and drug use and rampant crime and whatever. California could be ripe for a complete social revolution, and not the progressive revolution that they were looking for. I got a couple people in the chat here, Lisa and Augusto Pinochet. Lisa asked, "What does anybody know the cause of the wildfire?" I don't know. Really, I've been kind of just seeing photos and videos of it. It's not really something I've been focusing on, but it is a major disaster, and you know, there's a lot of people that are, you know, down there. People laugh at California that it's full of liberals. Well, there's a lot of normal people in California too. So let's not forget that. But I'm not aware of why the wildfires are starting right now. Pinochet says, "I think someone is setting those fires on purpose." Are you sure? Are you or I don't know. I mean, it happens. Things like that. Arson does happen. I believe that the fires in Northern California were some of them were started by an arsonist. Lisa says, "I was wondering if they were intentional. ISIS suggested jihadis start fires, so I was wondering too." Well, that's happened before. That happened in Israel, I believe. And you know, there are people who are just firebugs. Pinochet says, "My guess would be a radical socialist group or a Soros-funded group." Well, you kind of, I mean, let's substantiate something before we go off on that, because there's plenty of stuff that's true that we can blame Soros for. Jerry Brown let the Black Panthers handpick all the state's attorneys after his first election. Huh. And then he says he's an old revolutionary with ties to the Weather Underground and the American Communist Party. That's why he just okayed commies to run for state seats. And then Lisa says it's the same in Portland, Oregon with the homeless too. And then Pinochet says, if you want some incredible info on who in the government is rotten to the core, check out americasurvival.com or Trevor Loudon. I think he's from Australia. Yeah, he's a pretty interesting guy. A lot of really interesting information. I've heard of him. There's also this resource. Let me see if I still have the window open. It's called, yeah, I do. DiscoverTheNetworks.org, a guide to the political left. I'm going to, let me just share the link in the chat. That shows you can go there. You can find the nexus between any left-wing organization and any other one. So go look at that one. I've been using it for some projects lately. It's pretty great. Next topic. So John Conyers resigned, I think it was yesterday, and there's already calls right now for Al Franken to resign, and there's a huge problem with the way that these guys are thinking through their moves, and I'm talking about the Democrats as a whole. The Democrats think that by resigning, that or by having their pervs resign, they can get the moral high ground throughout this whole sexual harassment, moral panic. That's not quite the way it's going to work. It may seem like that's the fair way it would shake out, but that's not the way it's going to shake out. And I'll explain to you why. The climate that has allowed this to turn into a moral panic and some sort of national crisis, the whole sexual harassment thing, which I'm granted, I think that there's plenty of examples where sexual harassment is it's clearly a problem. And then of course there's the rape issue if rapes occurred, and it's just broken down along party lines. There's the Roy Moore, and then there's Al Franken, and people bring up one in order to attack the other. Or vice versa, bring up one in order to defend the other. Why won't you condemn Roy Moore? Well, why won't you condemn Al Franken? Well, there's a real problem. It's a problem of presumption of innocence that I've been talking about for a while now. And I think that even with Al Franken, who is starting to look even less and less credible, there's still a presumption of innocence if it's a criminal charge. Now, in terms of his public reputation, just like with Roy Moore, it can be ruined, and there's no presumption of innocence, unfortunately. And that goes. This is what I'll say about that. And this goes for Conyers as well. Everybody has now, because of the depth of this crisis, a person who has been exposed that they think, oh my, not him. I wish. Or her. I wish. Why don't you leave my people alone? For example, Danny Masterson, who's an actor, was hired on that '70s show, and now he's Rooster on The Ranch. If you watch Netflix, he's been accused of rape, and it looks like the allegations are credible. Looks like you can't know for sure. So what are you supposed to do? This is a person who, you like the work he does. You think he's hilarious, and this is a non-political issue. And yet, when somebody is accused of something like this, and there's a strong case against them, people I think are struggling right now to know who are the entertainers they can trust, who are the people that they can look to be passing their time when they don't want to be talking about politics, which everybody deserves a break from it. Yesterday I was watching Hot Fuzz, which is and The Ranch, which is the Danny Masterson show. I was like, yeah, this is great. Don't have to worry about any opinions or whatever. It's just straight up jokes. So yeah, the presumption of innocence still holds for even these politicians that we don't like. That's in the court of law. In the court of public opinion, when you waffle a lot and then you deny and then you admit some of it and then you pretend you don't remember something, which is what Al Franken did. Of course, no, you don't deserve to stay in office. I think at this point it probably would help for him to resign. Roy Moore, there's been plenty of weird reactions he's given to questions about these sexual assault allegations, but in terms of whether they're true, he's been standing completely like flag to the wind against them. It's not easy for them to take down somebody like that. They think he's easy to take down because they think he's an idiot, because they think he's some sort of country bumpkin down from Alabama, that he talks like this, and I ain't brought no bait for fishing this Sunday. I think I'm gonna just buy a bag of Wonder Bread, get it all soggy, and put some of it at the end of the fish hook. That's the way. That's what they think of Roy Moore. They think that he's one of these illiterate, toothless, inbred hicks that can't enunciate a sentence, and it's just not true. Now he does have some opinions that are way out there. If Roy Moore were to be running for Senate in a race that I could vote in, I might have to, vote through a third party or something. He just doesn't. I don't think I could really see myself voting for him. I'm not going to say that he's a despicable piece of crap, with or without the allegations, because I think that he does stick to his opinions, and he's been willing to lose jobs in order to stay true to his ideals, which is that's something that's not very typical nowadays in Washington. So, on the other hand, you have Franken. It says here, Senator last night reports he's decided to resign today are inaccurate. Embattled Minnesota U.S. Senator Al Franken denied last night he has decided to resign today, knocking down a public radio station report in his home state that he's quitting in the wake of sexual harassment allegations. Franken stated on his official Twitter page that he's talking with his family at this time and plans to make an announcement in D.C. tomorrow. Any reports of a final decision are inaccurate. Well, in my opinion, second. In my opinion, it's going to be a resignation at some point, because the entire Democratic Party establishment has now they've just slid into the pit against him. At a certain point, they decided to cut their losses with him. For a long time, they were saying, "Well, he deserves the benefit of the doubt, and we'll conduct an ethics investigation." Now, I don't know how concrete the latest charges against him. And Al Franken, when I was a kid, I used to read his books. I thought his books were pretty funny at the time. Of course, I was much more of a liberal in attitudes back then. Certainly not a liberal by today's standards, but I was much more liberal back then. When I'd say probably when I was in junior high. So, that goes to Lisa's comment. I find it close to impossible to separate the art from the artist. Well, I don't have a problem with that. Meaning, I do disagree. I can't share what you're saying, because I'll listen to artists that have opinions that are just completely out there that I don't agree with at all. Let's say Rage Against the Machine, complete communist trash people, but yeah, they have good music. What are you gonna say? They don't? Ice Cube, I like their music. I like his music. I mean, there's probably dozens of other. Radiohead, I'm a huge fan of Radiohead. A lot of their opinions I do like. Some of their opinions I don't like. Pinochet said, "You shall know them by their fruits." No, I mean, you guys have to admit that there are a couple people that you like their work, whether it's in music or in movies or in TV. What's her name? Kristen Stewart or whatever. What's the name of the girl from Hunger Games? Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah, I like her music. I think she's hot. She's a moron. She doesn't know anything about about the world. Complete idiot. Who's another one? There's endless ones. LeBron James. So yeah, I don't think I can agree with either of you guys, Lisa and Pinochet, but that's the difference. I think a lot of people they wear their opinions as a flag, and that's not really something. When I want to go enjoy a movie, I don't care. I mean, if it's Samuel L. Jackson, I'm not going to walk out of a movie because he said something disgusting. And Johnny Depp, another one, idiot, has no clue about anything, but he's an amazing actor in a lot of his films. So, yeah, apart from Al Franken, Liza Jean Williams, hey Ramon, just tuned in. Glad to see you back. Hopefully we'll speak soon. Pinochet says, "Is eat a mile of Miley's shit? Just find out where it came from." No, Miley Cyrus, I'm not a huge fan of. I think she compromised her career very early when yeah, Liza, I did see the email. I actually just glanced down at it, and yeah, we should talk probably sometime this weekend. But Liza Jean Williams, I think, is from Canada, so yeah, we'll probably be able to talk. There's some cool stuff that you were talking about like earlier that I'm pretty interested in. So anyway, to that point, when you say I can't separate the art from the artist, I can't agree with that at all. There's a lot of people I know, a lot of these liberal Jews, for example, that they say I can't listen to Richard Wagner, or Roger Waters. I think we should boycott Roger Waters or whatever. I happen to hate Roger Waters. I hate his music too. His solo music, not the Pink Floyd stuff, but his solo music I think is shit. So they want to boycott him, or they want to actually ban him from certain places. I say, why ban him? His music is fucking garbage. He's been living off of the legacy of the Wall for about 40 years now. Yeah, almost 40 years. In 2 years, it's going to be 40 years since the Wall, and he's living off of one album and pretending that he's some sort of musical genius. Meanwhile, his other, I remember one album I bought of his when I was a kid. I was really into Pink Floyd for a while. I bought David Gilmour's solo album, and I bought his solo album. And his solo album, Radio Chaos, was the biggest piece of shit I've ever seen on a compact disc. And I think that at a certain point, I just used it as some sort of coaster for my coffee cup or something. I hated it so bad. It must have been, something that he did while trying to get revenge against, one of his record producers or something. It was awful. So, but again, I don't believe that you should censor people. I don't believe that you should deplatform people, prevent them from performing or whatever. Look, these comics that they suck. For example, George Lopez went on stage, tried to, attack Donald Trump for his whole set, and gets booed off stage. Well, he got what he deserved. You should be able to read your audience, and if your audience is going to boo you for something that you believe, then I don't know why you're even bringing it up. If you're an entertainer, okay? If you're a politician, fine, say whatever the hell you want. George Lopez is an entertainer. That happened to Wanda Sykes, who I think she's a great comic, and she tried doing it too, got booed off stage. That's the way it works. So A. Pinochet says, everyone has that one artist that is, well, damn. Please elaborate on that. So John Conyers has endorsed his son, who is a domestic abuser, at least according to police charges. I think they might have waived the charges. So, again, innocent until proven guilty, right? Except the Democrats created that. They created that witch hunt mentality, whether it's with Russia, whether it's with this rape culture that they said on campuses. There's this rape culture that people are just, I think they made up a statistic that was 1 in 5 women is getting raped, and then you're surprised when suddenly there's all these false rape cases that are revealed, and it discredits it brings to doubt the accounts of many people who actually were abused or raped or sexually assaulted, whatever it is. The Duke Lacrosse case was the proto example back about 10 to 12 years ago. And then there was Rolling Stones, a rape on campus. So those were stories where the defendants were not afforded the presumption of innocence by the press. And it came back to bite them in the ass. Now you have people that are, John Conyers resigns and he endorses his son to take his spot. You might want to rethink that, Congressman, soon to be former Congressman. Says John Conyers III arrested but not prosecuted in domestic abuse case. This is from December 6, 2017. Okay, so that's from the day. John Conyers III, a Detroit hedge fund manager named as a possible successor to his scandal-rocked father, Representative John Conyers, was arrested in Los Angeles this year on suspicion of domestic violence, but prosecutors declined to charge him, according to documents obtained by NBC News. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office cited a lack of independent witnesses and their conclusion that it could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the victim's injury was not accidentally sustained while he was disarming her, according to case paperwork. In addition, prosecutors said the victim had no visible injuries behind a small stab wound to her lower bicep, and no other independent witnesses to what she described as earlier pushing and shoving by Conyers. Conyers, 27, was arrested on February 15th at a Los Angeles residence on suspicion of violence against his girlfriend after the alleged victim called police. The victim was not named in the document that recorded the decision not to file charges. The girlfriend said Conyers suspected her of cheating after he went through her computer. She told police that he body slammed her on the bed and then on the floor, where he pinned her down and spit on her. The report says. She said when she tried to call police, he took her phone and then chased her into the kitchen, where she grabbed a knife and told him to leave. By her account, he took the knife and swung it at her, cutting her arm. Both of them called 911 to complain about the other. Conyers III said the girlfriend had been using booze and pot, tried to throw him out the residence, and then got into a pushing and shoving match with him. He said she threatened him with a knife and was cut in a struggle for it. Conyers was taken into custody and released in lieu of $50,000 bond the same day. Conyers' father announced his resignation from Congress after more than 50 years representing Detroit Tuesday in the face of a number of allegations of sexual misconduct, and said he hopes his son would take over from him. Hoped. I have a great family here, and especially in my oldest boy, John Conyers III, who incidentally I endorsed to replace me in my seat in Congress. The congressman said in an interview on Detroit radio station WPZR. Afterwards, Conyers said in a statement that he had not decided whether to run, but hoped to do so by the end of the year, once I have taken the time to thoroughly listen to our community. This is Conyers III, the son. So John Conyers Jr. is the father who's in Congress, and John Conyers III is the son. Another family member, Michigan State Senator Ian Conyers, the grandson of Conyers' brother, told the New York Times that he plans to run for his great-uncle's seat. Conyers III's Facebook says he attended New York University and Morehouse College in Atlanta and identifies him as managing partner at LA Alpha Partners Fund Management based in Detroit. This agency didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Speaking to reporters last week after the allegations against his father emerged, Conyers III said, "With sexual assault, women are to be believed." So yeah, that's a weird one. That's a weird one. So I guess too bad for the people of Detroit. They're represented by morons. But what are you gonna do? A friend of mine says every nation deserves the leaders that it gets. Lisa says, I just cannot allow myself to indulge in escapism. If the artist entertainer repulses me, I don't wish to dictate to others. Pinochet says, you hate their art but are attracted to them. And then Williams says, I'm not attracted to backriders and most. All right. Lisa says she likes Barry Manilow. Well, Barry Manilow. There's so many hilarious stories about him. Anyway, yeah, the final story, of course, is a Jerusalem story. And I'll try to go through it as fast as possible without being in a rush. So, Liza James, I didn't say that. You didn't say what? You said you like Barry Manilow. You said you like Barry Manilow. I mean, it says right there. I said. I said that there's hilarious stories about Barry Manilow that the whole thing, he came out as gay this year. There's this friend of mine that said like 2 years ago, he's like, Barry Manilow not being like gay is like the biggest lie in Hollywood. Well, I guess there's a lot of bigger lies that have been going on lately. So anyway, the Israel thing, the embassy. So I wrote a piece. You should check out the piece. It's the first link below after the hashtag on my blog, and it's a very simple piece. It doesn't take too long to read, but it summarizes why this whole thing is bullshit. And I'll try to get to why I think that Donald Trump is using this as a tool for his agenda, which is that everything he does is in order to outsmart the opposition, and this is no exception. Now, a lot of people are citing the fact that it doesn't matter that Donald Trump decided to put the embassy in Jerusalem. Congress has already authorized it. They've authorized it numerous times. That I don't remember the bill number, but it's been ratified several times. There have been several presidents that have said that they would move the embassy. I think Clinton was the first who promised up front. George Bush is the first George Bush, but by the way, adamantly said he would not place the embassy in Jerusalem. And you see a lot of these APAC people, very hardcore, thinking that the embassy is like this big victory or something. Big deal. It's an embassy. You get an embassy in your capital city. Wow. Like Chris Rock said, what you want, a cookie? It's ridiculous. Sure, they moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I don't have a problem with it. A lot of people do have a problem with it, which we're going to get to. It's not a huge victory. First of all, it's been authorized by Congress for a while. But more importantly, by the way, as I show you the article, that I wrote on my personal blog page, this was Jerusalem before 1948. You had East Jerusalem was under Jordanian rule. You had West Jerusalem was under Israeli rule. So yeah, you have this graphic. There was already a part of Jerusalem that was part of Israel in 1948. So I'll tell you what. Based on that, remember that if you don't know, the whole negotiation process, the so-called peace process, is about the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. There's no dispute over West Jerusalem. So if Donald Trump moves the embassy to the western part of Jerusalem that's within the 1948 borders, there's really no justification for objecting to it. Now, why do people object to it? Well, I'll tell you what, there's a number of different motivations. The first motivation is that people don't believe that Jerusalem should be capital of any country. There's a lot of people that say, oh, under the original agreement from 1947, it was supposed to be an international city. Well, guess what? If one country, first of all, that agreement was signed by only one side, the Israelis. The other side, the Palestinian Arab leadership, who I don't believe they even wanted to become an independent country. They wanted to become part of one of the Arab states. They refused to sign it. So essentially, that agreement doesn't go into effect. How can you have an agreement when only one side agreed to it, and then after the war their position was stronger and they withdrew their consent to it. You can't. It doesn't work that way. Another argument is that any future Palestinian state must have its capital in East Jerusalem. That's the most consistent with the world's viewpoint. There's certainly reason to doubt that will ever happen, because the Palestinians don't seem to know how to negotiate or anything. They're not offering anything. They're only demanding, and the Israelis just they're backing. The Israelis ask them to go to negotiations, and they deny them. They deny them. Stevie Ray Vaughan is Liza Jean says, war. Your channel has no content. Well, that's not very nice. So I don't know. She might be referring to me, but I'm not sure. Maybe she's referring to somebody else in the chat. But that's not very nice, Liza Jean. Anyway, look, the embassy, it has all the legal standing to be in some part of Jerusalem. The question is which part. If we were to put it in East Jerusalem, yeah, there'd be probably a lot of objection, just because East Jerusalem is supposedly going to go back to the Arabs. But this is manufactured nonsense. And, for people to be making this huge ruckus over it, no, they're playing right into his hands. Now, the other motivations for it are, for example, people that don't believe that there should be a state of Israel. They're saying, well, we should liberate the entire country and have it become Palestine, or even go further than that and expel all the Jews and make it a completely Muslim state. There's also the one-state solution. There's a number of people that say we should combine both countries, issue full rights to the Palestinians, and it would be one state with two peoples. Now, what people forget often is that some of the same people are saying, well, we're going to deport all of the Jews that are of European descent. Well, that would actually be, definitively racist. That's the Israelis allow a lot of Arab citizens to live within their borders. That's not just the Palestinians. These are called Israeli Arabs. They have Israeli citizenship. So I'm speaking as somebody who lived there. I'm speaking as somebody who served in their armed forces. I think that the case against moving the embassy is pretty weak, because it's really a non-factor. There's a part of the city where you can put the embassy, and there is no violation of any law or anything such. Now, I'm going to close. I'm going to talk about okay. Oh, she says she was talking to Pinochet, not you. I don't stand for much. Liza Jean says, in my opinion, the Israelis are looking for war. Well, you have to explain why, because if they wanted a war, they'd probably win within 10 minutes. It's not very hard for the Palestinian Authority and its armed wings and whatever. They're not a very sturdy military force. They've been defeated several times. They've admitted defeat several times, and that's why they're in the position they are in today. So, why is it that Trump is doing this? Well, I'll tell you a reason, and maybe I doubt that, again, I don't know you guys personally, but I doubt that you guys have thought of it, which is that, remember that Trump is now in charge of the State Department. The State Department is one of the most deep statey of the deep state institutions. It's really run by a lot of career Foreign Service officers, and often they're loyal to certain interests, progressive interests in some cases. In some cases, they're loyal to the oil lobby or the defense contractors or whatever. And this move, now that he's guided the State Department to begin procedures to actually build an embassy in Jerusalem, he's going to see if anybody does any foot dragging, and then he'll know who to eliminate. And it's to some extent similar to what he did with the FBI. That's how he suddenly fired Sally Yates, because she refused to comply with the federal, his executive order on immigration. So what he did was he signed an executive order on immigration. It says, these 7 countries, they're banned, they're refugees and or nationals can't come here for the next 90 days until we figure out what the hell is going on. So, and by the way, that executive order, who knows if it actually accomplished anything? I don't know. It's been way more than 90 days. So I think we should ask whether the extreme vetting has actually been. That's a good thing. Maybe you can criticize Trump while asking for his agenda. If you wanted extreme vetting, you should probably be asking right now, well, what have you guys found out? I mean, what does this extreme vetting mean? But ultimately, what this really meant was that he exposed a lot of these people within his administration that would not be willing to comply with his policy directives, which in this case would mean that he finds out who he should be firing. And if you're a person who works for, let's say, the department, the State Department. Okay, let's stay on this topic. If you work for the State Department and Donald Trump says, for example, you're a procurement officer, he says, well, start looking for quotes for concrete, and like 20 days later or whatever, you discover that, for example, the person hasn't looked for any of the concrete or any of these other materials. Now that's grounds for firing, because it's dereliction of duty. The president can order somebody to who works for the government to do something lawful, but it's still something. And this, in my opinion, is in some ways a brilliant strategic move. He's going to be exposing, for example, the world leaders that he thinks are undependable. He's already done that with Theresa May. Theresa May, who got more mad at him for pointing out Islamic extremism in his country than she was mad at the actual Islamic extremists. I doubt she's even mad at those extremists that basically planned to murder her this week. So, it's a very easy parallel to talk about. He's basically exposing a lot of his foes that are hidden within the deep state by seeing which ones are going to be objecting to this change. Liza G. Williams says Palestinians were there before the Jewish state was declared. Well, the Palestinian people, I can tell you, as somebody who has spoken to a lot of them through personal experience, through a variety of channels, they're not. The Palestinian people are not distinct from the Syrian people or from the Jordanian people. There is no distinguishing characteristic, except for a couple regional cultural differences. They have absolutely nothing distinguishing about them. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. There's a number of things that are common to them that are not great. Although I'm saying that I do know people that are good, good guys from the communities. I actually used to work with a great guy who was Palestinian, a lot younger than me, but we worked at the same job. And for somebody, I could ask you, for example, where is the Palestinian flag from? Where is their flag from? You should notice that their flag is virtually the same as the Sudanese flag. Don't you think that's a little weird? Don't you think it's a little weird that all of the Arab nations that came out of World War II, only a few had patterns that were not black, red, white, and red. Wait, did I say red twice? It's black, white, red, and green. Right? All of those nations, they have the same flag. Why? Because there is no individual regional identity in most cases, except for Egypt, for example. They're not really, a lot of the Egyptians don't believe that they're truly Arabs, so to speak. Now, the Palestinians were invented as a distinct people. Not to say that there weren't Palestinian Arabs in the region of Palestine before 1948, but as a distinct people, they were invented somewhere in the 1950s to 60s. The leader of the Palestinian Authority, when it first was founded, he started a group in 1958, I believe, in Kuwait. Okay, Liza, Gene, listen real quick. He started a group in 1958. Well, where was the West Bank and where was Gaza in 1958? Who controlled it in 1958? Look up the Fatah group, his organization. Yasser Arafat's organization. It was founded in 1958 in Kuwait. Why wasn't it founded in 1958 in Gaza or the West Bank when it was under Egyptian or Jordanian rule? Jordan ruled the West Bank. Egypt ruled Gaza, both of them until 1967. So they had a chance until 1967 to receive a state. Well, why didn't they receive a state? If the Arab states owned that land, why didn't they give a state to Yasser Arafat? And if they wouldn't give a state to him, how come he didn't rise up in rebellion against the Egyptians in Gaza? And how come he didn't rise up in rebellion against the Jordanians in the West Bank, which he did later, but only after 1967? Well, the reason was that they wanted to, quote unquote, liberate the entire country. They don't believe that there is anybody else that can live in their country. A lot of these people, they're supported by open borders advocates. Well, a lot of these open borders advocates don't believe that Jewish people can settle in the land of Israel. Isn't that a little contrary to the open borders principle? Don't you think that's a little strange that people that often believe that there should be open borders and that, let's say, Mexicans should be able to come into this country, or refugees should be able to go into Canada in unrestrained numbers? Well, they don't believe the same thing about their country. And what do they call it? They call it colonialism. Well, what's colonialism? You look at some of these countries like Saudi Arabia. They send their people over to the United Kingdom. They buy up assets. They buy up soccer teams, for example. They're using their capital as colonial appendages. Now, Saudi Arabia is apparently, according to some people, going through some sort of reform. I don't really care about that. I'm just saying that this whole narrative that the Palestinian people owned the country before 1948 is a charade. It's a charade. If not for British military, it would have still been a province of the Ottoman Empire. And it never was a real country. The Arabs who lived there before 1948, I'm not going to say that they were wrong for opposing people who came in to take it over, but they lost the war in 1948. And they had a chance back then to get a deal, and they declined it. They declined the deal before 1948. They would have gotten much more land than before. So they declined the deal, and they've declined it ever since. They've just turned it down, and they said, well, we want the whole thing. We want the whole thing. Every time they want the whole thing. And what do when they don't get it? They fight a war, and then they lose. And what happens when you lose a war? It doesn't mean you get everything that you wanted before the war. It means you have to settle for something less. Liza Jean Williams says, didn't the Rothschilds create the state of Israel? Well, didn't the Carnegies create Pittsburgh? Didn't the Rockefellers create Cleveland? Didn't Henry Ford create Detroit? Sure, the Rothschilds donated a lot of money to some of these causes, sure. But just because somebody donates money to a cause, everybody says the same thing. They say, well, Soros donated money to this cause, therefore it's illegitimate. It might be weird. It might bring question to why George Soros is supporting a cause. It doesn't necessarily mean that George Soros right now is donating to Palestinian causes. So does that invalidate their cause? He's not donating to the Israelis. So does George Soros donating to the Palestinians invalidate the Rothschilds donating to the Israelis? Is that think about it that way. Does is this a game of blackjack or something? I have one billionaire and you have another, and we'll see who gets the 21 first. It's a ridiculous thing. So George Soros is on the Palestinian side. Does that mean that their side is wrong because George Soros is supporting it? No, you have to look at the case on its merits. So yeah, some of the Rothschilds, who are a huge family, did donate to establishing certain early settlements in Israel before 1948, and they were at the time not armed. I think they were mostly of a bunch of religious Jews. What happened later was the Zionist movement, and people have conflated the whole thing with international banking and whatever. Look, there's a lot of things that international banking does. There's a lot of things that I mean, J.P. Morgan bailed out the U.S. government. Does that mean that we're the United States of J.P. Morgan now? Well, to a certain extent, we are. But the reason that we had to be bailed out was because our government didn't know how to manage its money. So that the lesson here is not to say, well, because this person bailed out or funded this cause is invalid, because every single cause was funded by somebody. Okay? But now George Soros, you look at his causes, they tend to be destructive. You look at the Rothschilds, yeah, I'd probably say that there's people who know a lot more about the Rothschilds than I do. I could be wrong about some of those things. But to say that the Rothschilds funded the state of Israel, in 1948 or before that, which was, I think, if I remember correctly, it was way before that. It was probably in the 1800s they started, paying for people to move there. At the time, it was virtually a vacant lot. Mark Twain visited Palestine in the 1800s. It was called Palestine because it was a province of the Ottoman Empire. They used the Roman name for the region. It had nothing to do with Arabs, and it had nothing to do with Islam. The name Palestine doesn't have anything to do with Islam. It has nothing to do with Arab identity. The name Palestine is simply a name adopted from previous nations that owned the country. They never had a capital there. It was owned by the Turks. The Turks had their capital in Istanbul. It was, I think it was owned by the Byzantines before that. Excuse me, the Crusaders. So Lisa says it's common for the same entity to fund both sides of a conflict. Well, you're missing the point there. The Rothschilds and the Soros are not the same person. And the Rothschilds' role in this goes, that was over 150 years ago. So look, if you think that, oh, they gave this money, so this is now illegitimate. Well, who do you think bankrolled the American Revolution? Somebody did that. Ding, 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 Lisa. Well, at least you have somebody agreeing with you. So she says war is a racket. Well, absolutely it's a racket. And there's war profiteers, and Henry Ford was a war profiteer. He fought against having a war with Germany, and yet what did he do? He sold war materials to the United States government. I believe GM and IBM, they sold equipment to the Nazis. If you dig far enough, there is some sort of nexus between some major, source of capital and some cause that you disagree with. So are you going to say, Liza Jean, I'm addressing this question directly to you, because Henry Ford was a vicious racist and hated, he did hate Jews, but he was very racist towards, and I believe he was a believer in eugenics. Does that mean you're not going to buy a Lincoln? Does that mean you're not going to buy, a Ford Mustang or something? Is that the answer? Because Henry Ford, he found, by the way, the Ford Foundation, which I think is still run by some of his descendants, They donate to Black Lives Matter. If you disagree with the Black Lives Matter, but the Ford Foundation donates to it, and I think the Ford Foundation does get donations from Ford Motor Company. Does that mean you're going to boycott Ford Motor Company? Now she says something about hemp. I don't know where this is going. So I do have to go. It's been long enough. But yeah, think about it. You don't have to agree with me. Please read my blog article. Comment in the blog section, in the comment section of the blog, or you can comment in the video below. And again, you're bringing up the Rothschilds. I listen to a guy, Lionel Nation. He deals with these questions all the time. I don't really deal with these questions all the time, but I figured today it was big enough news. But anyway, have a great night and stay bold.